Hey Cass, what's happening? Today I'm going to tell you some stories about some of the crazy parties that I went to in the past. Now, for those of you who've been watching my channel, you know that my past was soiled with a lot of partying. I did a lot of drinking, among other things, and I've really curbed that activity at this stage of my life and straightened things out. But things were getting pretty wild. And the odd thing is about this that I'm going to talk about was, I partied ever since I was a teenager. And when I say partied, I mean I drank a lot, I smoked a lot of weed, I did other drugs too, but mostly just weed and alcohol. But then I got into the motorcycle culture as right as a older teen and all the way up to the present. But my early motorcycle culture really didn't affect this story so much as when I got a Harley Davidson. And this is the weird thing because and it might have just been the culture that I was in, the company that I was in, the biker bar that I was hanging out in, but things started to turn around for me in regards that I started getting all kinds of offers to attend private parties, which it was all kind of like a subculture that I never ever realized existed. One of the first parties I went to, now I'm not talking about motorcycle rallies like Sturgis or even an Easy Riders rodeo event or one of these other bike week things. No. These are private parties by invitation only. And most of these were word of mouth. There wasn't any advertising. If you were invited, then it was okay for you to go. And I had been invited to this party, and it was kind of way out in the boondocks, out in the middle of nowhere, on this property. And the guy had a nice little house there, nothing fancy, but there was all kinds of bikers there, Harleys and stuff. And I remember, it was pretty amazing to me that how all these Harley riders would get together and just, they had kegs of beer, they had tables of food, they were showing off motorcycles. Some of the guys would pull their bike up to the garage door and smoke the tire. In fact, one guy there, he pulled his bike up to the garage. He had like an old shovel head, and he just ran that thing into the ground till the tire exploded. And I thought he was going to blow up his engine too, because he just had that thing screaming. He's what I would call, one of those old school bikers with a wrench sticking out of his back pocket. And I was pretty amazed to see things like that because I hadn't really been involved in a lot of that through all my previous years of motorcycling. It was a lot more reserved, I guess. One guy had his motorcycle out in the front yard, and the guy had a nice lawn, and he just started smoking his tire right there in the grass and buried the back wheel of his Harley clear down to the fender into the grass, dug himself a hole, and it took a couple guys to push it up out of that hole. But the craziest thing about that party was out in the back behind the house there was like a cornfield or something, or a hay field, and way out in the field there was this great big silver balloon that was like sitting out there in the field. And here what it was a waterbed mattress that they had filled up with oxygen and acetylene. I don't know how they did it, but they shot something at it, and I don't remember if it was a flare gun or a tracer, something that ignited this balloon. I had no idea what I was about to experience, but the explosion was intense. It set off like a mushroom cloud flame into the field, and the percussion was just thundering. I mean, it shook the windows on houses, and like a couple seconds after the blast, you could actually feel a shock wave. Wham! It kind of hit us right in the chest. And I mean, I was just blown away. I never saw anything like that before. Well, about an hour later, the revelry went on. About an hour later, the sheriffs all pulled up in the driveway and wanted to know where the explosion was and who was setting off bombs. Of course, everybody at the party said, "Oh, we don't know anything about it. We really don't. We didn't hear an explosion. We don't know anything." So at that point, the sheriff was pretty helpless to do anything about it. They just turned around and left, but I'm sure they kept a close eye on us after that stage of the game. Another party I went to was a night party. It was in the afternoon, evening, and it was a clam bake. And it was by invitation only, and it was a biker party. And when we arrived, it wasn't a very big party, but just for kind of a select number of bikers that went to this thing. And it was like all you could eat. They had clams, mussels, corn on the cob, I mean, all kinds of food, and it was really delicious stuff. But everybody got a bottle, like a wine bottle, of this guy's homemade, he called it grog. And it kind of had like an apple cinnamon flavor to it, like a spiced tea thing, but boy, did it pack a punch. It was very high alcohol content. Well, you took a sip of this stuff and it tasted like candy and you just couldn't stop drinking it. And of course, everybody had their own bottle. I had my own bottle, so I thought, I was in heaven. I just kept swigging on this thing. And I'm pretty sure I consumed the whole bottle. And then at that point, there were more bottles set out on the table for whoever wanted them. And I continued filling up Dixie cups and drinking that too. Well, I don't think I've ever been so drunk in my life. In fact, I think at that party I got alcohol poisoning. I don't remember how I got home. I have no idea, no recollection of the party ending, but somehow I ended up back home with the motorcycle. And I'm not kidding you, I had probably 3 days to recover from that party. It hit me really hard. I mean, I think it almost killed me. So I was really careful with that grog after that, and I did have more than one occasion to receive more of that stuff, which I did, but I took it very carefully because of the high alcohol content in it. As the years went on, I began to host parties here of my own on this property, and we had some pretty good parties here. One particular year, I had hosted a huge party, biker party here, and I had a band that offered to play for free. It was like a country rock band, and they were really good. Their only stipulation was that I build them a stage platform. So I built them a little raised platform with some plywood and some timbers just to keep their equipment off of the ground in case it rained. And then my buddy offered one of these portable tent-like garage port things, and we put over the stage that had like sides on it. So it was a completely enclosed stage for the band, and they could set up all their equipment. And they played through the wee hours of the morning, and they were good. And we had a pretty huge crowd here. We had kegs of beer, we had all kinds of food, we had a bonfire, and it was pretty fun time. But as I remember, with these biker parties, you weren't required to go home. You didn't have to go home. You could spend the night there. And the host was always cordial enough to even serve breakfast and coffee in the morning. So I remember in the morning getting up and I had big old pot-bellied bikers that were skinny dipping out in the pond, getting their morning bath, I guess. It was a sight for sore eyes, no doubt. I had people sleeping on the front porch, on the back porch. I had people sleeping in the living room, on the couch, on the floor, upstairs, downstairs, everywhere. And then, just kind of served a real easy breakfast. I don't remember what we did, and I don't know how many pots of coffee we went through just continually. And I think most of the people hung around, and I think it was probably into the late afternoon when everybody finally ended up going home. And it left me with quite a huge mess to clean up. I spent like a whole day going around with a trash bag, pulling beer cans out of the woods and out of my landscape beds, picking up cigarette butts, paper plates, trash. It was a mess, and then we had to dismantle the whole stage and put everything back. I think after that party I said, no, I'm not doing this anymore, because it was just way too much work. And the damage it did, I mean, I had cigarette burns on the carpet, on the countertops, in the bathroom, on the floor. They trashed my house, period. So that was the end of that. I said never again. There was another party that I was invited to, and it was in a remote area way out in a little off near a little small burg out in the middle of nowhere. And it was a big, long gravel drive that went back into this place. And back in there was a great big, huge pole barn that was a newer structure. But they had a big bonfire, and they had food and alcohol and things like that. At one point during the evening, one of the guys grabbed me and said that they wanted to give me a tour of this pole barn, this building, which they did. And it was designed so that a tractor trailer semi could drive right into it, right into the middle. And on either side, there was industrial shelving that was stacked to the ceiling with everything from A to Z. I assumed that it was all stolen goods, where truckers would bring loads in there and offload some of the stuff for resale, and I don't know how it all worked, but it was some kind of crooked operation that most people would not have been privy to. Made me a little nervous, because I knew in that culture, to get involved in things like that, even just to be shown something like that, if something went wrong, you could be accused of, snitching or talking to the wrong people or something. So it was a little unnerving for me, and I really tried to stay away from that kind of culture. But see, sometimes you didn't know what you were getting into until you were already into it, and that was the problem with the group, with the people that I kind of hung around with. You never knew what was going to happen. Now, the last story I'm going to tell you about was pretty shocking. We were at a party, and they had a big bonfire. I remember sitting around the bonfire drinking, and there was quite a crowd there of people, and the bonfire was huge, great, big, great, and you couldn't get very close to it, so there was quite a ring of people around this fire. And somebody pointed out that way back behind the property, in the field, way out in the field, there was another fire that you could see flames out there. Well, we started looking and thinking, what the heck's going on? What do they got, another bonfire out there or something? Because, and you could just barely make out shadows of somebody walking around there, a couple people, but you couldn't tell what was going on. All of a sudden, this big flaming cross erected. Somehow they pushed it up, and it stood up in the field, probably about a good 16 feet tall, I'm going to guess. And the jaws dropped. Nobody expected to see anything like that. Now, there was a handful of people that cheered and applauded, but most of the people were kind of in shock, because that is construed as a racial thing. I think, the area that it was, let's put it this way, was noted for the place where the head of the clan lived at that time. And so I'm not sure if he was involved in, I wouldn't know who he was by looking at him or by his name or anything. I couldn't even tell you his name at that point. But he lived, the Grand Wizard of the clan lived in that vicinity, And so I think that may have had something to do with that, but that was not like a Klan party. It was just a biker party. And I don't know who thought it would be amusing to do that, but there was a few people that just packed up and left and said, no, we're not into this. And I don't think I stayed very long after that either, because I wasn't really in line with that kind of thinking and never have been. But it was quite shocking to see something like that at a biker party. So yeah, those were some of my most notable experiences at these private biker parties. There was a lot of other situations that went on, but those were the top events that I can share with you at this point. I don't know if you've ever been to any wild biker parties. I'm sure if you spent any time riding or been involved in the culture, you've been to some parties. And like I say, I'm not talking about going to Sturgis or anything like that. These are, some real down and dirty, just private parties. So there you go, cats. There's my stories for today. I hope you enjoyed them. Give me a thumbs up. Like my videos. Share them with your buddies. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe to my channel. And I will keep you amused as long as I can. I'll keep going back into the cobwebs and bringing out my best stories that I can. Until next time, guys, ride hard and die free.